Hi everybody, Jennifer here again from Channel Frederator Network. Thank you for coming. A few of you have already posted questions. Am I here on time? Yes, you are. We're starting about 5 minutes late just to make sure people are on time because a lot of you are late, but it's okay. So as you know, we've been doing this whole month has been crowdfunding. We already did Patreon, we did Indiegogo, and now today we're doing Kickstarter with George. So I hope you guys saw the Patreon and Indiegogo live streams that we did. If not, they're on our business-facing YouTube account, which is channelfrednetwork.com, or youtube.com, sorry, youtube.com/channelfrednetwork. It's our YouTube page. And definitely check those out. This live stream will also be available after we finish on the YouTube account, so you can go rewatch it all there. So for those of you that don't know me, but you all pretty much should, I'm Jennifer. I'm an MCN manager here, and I'm the one who organizes all the live streams for you guys. So if you have any suggestions for any live streams in the future, you should totally let me know, and I will try my best to organize everything. You can send me emails at jennifer@frederator.com. So enough about me. Also with us, we have Nate. He's been on all the other live streams so far. Nate, will you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Nate Olson. I'm the Director of Marketing, and Licensing, and Publicity for Frederator. And I'm the point person on our crowdfunding. And so that's why I've been in on these conversations. We at Frederator really believe in crowdfunding. We think that not only is it a tremendous way to raise money, which is super important for all sorts of reasons, it's also a great way of connecting with your fans and promoting your project. So we'll talk more about that.
Awesome. Thank you. And last but not least, we have wonderful George to come and talk all about Kickstarter. He's actually the one that helped us with our own BM Puppy Cats Kickstarter, and he definitely knows what he's doing. So why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself a little bit, George, and we can go ahead and get started.
Gosh, thank you. Yeah, my name's George Rohac. I'm currently the head of Breadpig. We basically, our strategy company help people out with different projects or any kind of like admin logistics stuff they need help with. I got involved with Kickstarter. Oh gosh, like 3-4 years ago now, helping some friends self-publish graphic novels, collections of their webcomics. And since then, I've been associated with, I'm coming up on 4 dozen campaigns at this point, so it's a little crazy. Yeah, I guess that's it. Do you want me to just kind of dive into it?
Yeah, why don't you go ahead and, because I know you prepared a little presentation for us. So as you're setting that up, I'm going to go ahead and remind everyone in the network that we do have on the side here this question and answer form. A few of you have been using it kind of for a chat thing. It's not for chat, it's for like questions. If you want to just chat, you can go to the Google Plus event page, and then, but if you have an actual question, you can go right ahead and ask it in that little question and answer pane, and we will be answering. Mostly we'll field your questions at the end, but you can go ahead and write your questions in any time, so that way we can prepare for questions you're going to ask us. So yeah, so we'll let George get the screen share organized, and then I'm going to let him go ahead and do his thing. Ready, George? Maybe. Do we freeze?
Are we all good?
Oh yeah, we're good. I can hear you now.
Okay. Excellent. I'm like a robot because some of the audio is talking over very tilted for me.
Yeah, it sounds the same for me too. Maybe it'll give it a little bit to catch up. Or maybe it's...
Okay. Well, I think that may be the screen share issue. Okay, well, let me know if it's still doing it. I'm going to dive in. So, as I said, I'm associated with nearly 4 dozen campaigns. It's been a lot.
Hey, George. George, it's actually like the audio is really bad. Do you think you can get off the live stream and then come back on, and hopefully that'll reset?
also not do full screen.
Yeah, maybe it's also the full screen that's messing it up.
Sure.
Oh, well, now you sound fine. Does he? No, never mind. Sorry, guys, technical
Yeah,
difficulties.
actually, I'm trying something real quick. So be right back.
Yes.
I would say we met George. Oh, are you unmuted?
No, go ahead.
We met George because he was working for Homestuck at the time at San Diego Comic-Con last year, and we were talking with George about all sorts of different interesting things, and George had helped run a big Kickstarter for Homestuck, and was an expert in comic books. And as we talked about what we were planning to do with Being Puppy Cat, he said, well, this is what I do. I help people run Kickstarters. And he was so expert at what he did. He helped us define the reward tiers. He had some calculations on how to do the pricing. We worked through the strategy for the communication, all sorts of things. And there are several organizations that will help you do it. We really like George in particular, and he's an expert at Kickstarter, having done, like you said, dozens and dozens of campaigns. He's also an expert in comic books and graphic novels and end-to-end the publishing and the making of that, of those kinds of things. So I'm not sure. Hopefully we'll get to what George is looking for in clients and what the pricing structure is. It might not make sense for him to work with some of your campaigns, but it might. But there are people who could do that. And so make sure that you are queuing up questions about every single aspect of a Kickstarter campaign, because George can speak to them.
And besides us, there's also a few people in the network that have already done successful Kickstarters. Like the Red Goddess video game Kickstarter was just funded, which is great, and it was actually the second time his first Kickstarter didn't go over so well. The second time went much, much better. He went way over the goal. So there are also people in the network that have already done it or are planning to do it, and they can totally help you out. I think George is back now. George, can you hear us? Do you sound like a robot?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. All right.
You don't sound like a robot anymore.
Cool. Good. And I can do my screen share thing. So
Yay!
Yeah.
All right.
Sorry about that. I think that was I was on my little Pixel, and it can't split what it's screen sharing, so it was full screening you in infinity in the background, and that's why we were getting the audio errors.
That's
so
okay.
All right. So I'm gonna get back into this.
Go for it. Start from the very beginning.
Yeah. So crowdfunding, particularly in Kickstarter, like I said, at this point, nearly 4 dozen campaigns. It's been a lot. There's been a lot of really cool stuff that I've gotten to work on, and yeah. Recently, these are the 3 most recent ones. Right now, Breadpig is helping Augie and the Green Knight, which is the book from Zach Wiener and the French artist Boulet about a little girl scientist in a fantasy world. It's really cool. This is a list of campaigns that I have worked on that have not been successful. And I work for Breadpig, as I said. So, getting into crowdfunding, there's a number of things that I want to explain that it's a lot of work, a fundamental amount of work. You've already heard from, a couple other people, but I really want to drill that in. You are going to spend a significant amount of your time while running a campaign, or even in the process of planning a campaign, making sure that everything's right and making sure that you're engaged with your people. It is not just a license to print money. Unfortunately, that's a notion that a lot of people get because they see successful campaigns, they see, just something that's in a similar vein or similar genre, and they feel like they can just capitalize on it. It's going to be a lot of work. One of the things you can do to help make sure that you're capitalizing as much as you can on what you have is kind of asking yourself a number of questions before you even go into the campaign. Number 1, who knows you? And by that I mean, who knows you online? This is going to come in really important. So Google+, Facebook, Tumblr, Twitter, where are you active? Where do you talk to your fans? Or where do you have followers? Identifying that beforehand. What are you doing? So are you doing animation? Are you doing a movie? Are you doing a game? Are you doing a comic? Literally, what is it? And how can you distill that and talk about it in a short time frame to someone? where is it being made is the next question you have to ask. That means if there's physical parts of it, so if you have to do, if you're making a book, where is it being printed? Where is it being shipped from? If you're doing, animation, where is it being made? Do you need to go back and forth with people like sending physical things back, or is it just going to be online? So then that immediately leads into when you need funding by. If you're printing a book and you're dealing with a printer that needs 6 weeks, then that means that you are going to need that money 6 weeks before the date of when you want to actually have the thing. So that's something very important to keep in mind. The next is why people should care. And this is where your excitement and your enthusiasm about the project is most important. So if you clearly don't seem excited about doing the project you're doing the, whatever it is, it's going to come across, because this is a very, direct engagement with the public and with your community. And if you don't seem like you're super excited to be throwing everything else away and working on this, they're going to know. So for one brief second, most of you will know these are the, who, what, where, when, why, and that leads us to, well, okay, you've answered all of those. How? So how to plan. So you've answered these questions. You know what you want to do. What's next? And full disclaimer, this is where I'm going to get into scary numbers. So brace yourselves. The first thing I do whenever working with anyone is determine a safety. And a safety for a project is basically what's the min range that I think we're going to be able to hit comfortably. Like if everything messes up, if there's internet outages, if no social media gets pushed, if everything's terrible, what's the bottom of the barrel I think that this thing could achieve. So that comes back to the old rule of 3%. So in advertising, there's an old rule of basically the eyeballs you reach, you're going to see a 3% return on 3% return on investment. If you aren't, that's bad. So you can take your audience, the average reach of what you have across all of your social media online, and figure that 3% of them are going to be super excited, willing to kind of run with you wherever, no matter what. And that's going to be your core, the super fans. They're the people who are absolutely going to be there for you. Popular ranges, then is this going to be where you plot out kind of your tier amounts. So 3%, keep that in mind, because we're about to come back to it next. But popular ranges, whenever you're dealing with planning your rewards, are a 15 to 25. And that's where 30% of your backers are going to come in at, on average. Another is the 50 to 75 window, and that's where about 20% of your backers are going to come in at. And then 90 to 150, and that's going to be around 10%. Now that's the number of backers. They're actually going to all raise around the same amount of money for you on average. So this isn't just an abstract thing. Here, this is an old photo of my Twitter account. That's how many followers I have. 1878. I have more now, but whatever. That means 3% is 56 people, right? So we're going to play a little game. Let's say I want to make a book. I want to make George's comic book. 56 people. So if at 15 to 25, 30% of that is 17, and 50 to 75 is 11 people, and then 90 to 50 gives me around 5 and nearly an extra person. So we'll round down and say 5. You'll notice, where's the other 50%, right? Well, whenever you're planning, you can't always assume that everyone's going to be at the right time of month, the right time of life, have the budget, or just be in a right place. So again, all of this, as I'm saying, I do this all very conservatively, so I know where the safety is, and that's why I call it a safety. It's not the pie in the sky. We'll get to that. So with that in mind, let's figure out how much money I could conceivably make on a project like this. So, run the numbers. It's 255 to 425 from, the base tier of whatever I do, for this like mid tier, I end up making 550 to 825, and for a high tier, I would probably make 450 to 750. So, you know, not bad ranges, but you add that all up, and basically it means that my safety range is on the low end 1255 and on the high end 2K. That I can comfortably like assume that if I mess a lot of things up, I'll be able to make by doing like this project. So, okay, what's next? The next thing you have to do is then figure out kind of your costs. And by that, I mean a couple of things. What does it cost to make? What does it cost to get it somewhere? What does it cost for it to be packaged? And then what does it cost for it to be shipped to backers? So if you're not dealing with anything physical, that's great, because then your cost per good are going to be really low. So the cost to make the thing and the cost to get it somewhere initially is what your cost per good is. So, and whenever I'm saying cost to get it somewhere, I explicitly mean from like the plant to your warehouse or the plant to your doorstep. Basically from where it gets made to where you're going to be prepping it to get sent out to people. And that's the cost per good. That's fairly like unchangeable. The next thing that you're going to have to calculate is shipping cost. And this is where a lot of projects for like smaller companies and individuals end up like just going completely into the red. It is absolutely the silent killer of all crowdfunding and Kickstarter projects, like ubiquitously. Like I've seen it time and time again. So you have to figure out what the cost to and for packaging is, plus the cost of shipping. And that gives you the total shipping cost. Now, one thing I want to point out is that what a lot of people forget to do is the cost to and for packaging includes buying a box for it and paying someone, or the time you yourself are going to lose putting a reward into a box or envelope and then getting it to like the post office or UPS or whatever. You need to, even if this is something you are going to handle on your own, you need to recognize that that is time lost, because every moment you aren't doing animating, making like videos, drawing comics, like making games, whatever it is time that you aren't doing that primary thing that you do. You don't want to be a shipping bot, so like you need to make sure you allot for that loss of your time. And so shipping costs plus your cost per good gives you the total cost of the of a reward tier. And at this point, I'm throwing a lot of numbers at you, and I'm getting abstract again. So I'm certain this is people's heads, and I apologize. So I'm going to kind of go back to the example we had said. So I want to print George Rohac's comic book. I want to print 2,000 comics, right? I got a bid from a printer, and that's the minimum. That's what they said they are going to charge me for 2,000 like floppy comic books. The freight cost to me is $500. So that means that, you know, $2,500 divided by 2,000 copies means my cost per good is $1.25. Okay. So then mailers and labor, let's go into the shipping. Mailers and labor is $2, right? I need to buy like envelopes, stay flats to throw them in, and then I have a friend that's willing to work for like, you know, barely above minimum wage, chuck in envelopes for me. Cool. Add that to, you know, it's a printed book, so it's printed material, means it can be shipped. It means it can be shipped media mail, which is the cheapest method. If it's something that's not printed, then you have to go regular like postal rates, and that's where things start going insane. You know, that's about an average cost, so you know, about $4 per. So that means that 525 is kind of the 525 winds up being the total once you add up the shipping cost and the cost per good. You know? Okay. So now that we've determined this weird little number, what's it going to mean? Well, for commercial projects, meaning projects that are being done for a profit. In a moment, I'm going to get into the two types of projects, but if you're making something with the goal of continually selling this for a longer period of time, you're a commercial project, you're for profit, you're essentially doing a pre-order. And what that means is you should probably be keeping an eye that your profit range stays around 20 to 30% of the cost. So basically, for that 15 to 25 range, your total cost should be $3 to $6. For 50 to 75, 7 to 15, and for that top tier range, around 16 to 30. So there's a fluctuation there, but usually you always want to remain in that below 25% at worst. Like, for some things, if you really want to be generous, or it's something complicated, having it bump up to 30 is okay, but really you don't want to go beyond that. So now that we know kind of like a cost per good and the shipping cost, and we know how many people we have, we can kind of figure out how to set a goal, right? So let's see. We've got the goods. That's $2,500. Ship to backers. It's $225. Where that $225 comes from is the previous amount of backers that we presume bare minimum for the safety, right? Times the shipping cost. So that means total is $2,775. And we said the top end of the safety for me would be $2K. So that means that it's at a negative $775. It means it's not within the safety. This project right now wouldn't be within the safety. Now, what does that mean if your project isn't within the safety? It means you have to ask yourself whether or not the project you're doing is patronage or pre-order. And those are two very different presentations whenever you're doing a project. Patronage is very much you earnestly and emphatically saying, like, look, I want to do this thing. Much of it is not yet done. If I do not have the funding for it, I cannot get it done. Pre-order is much more, hey, I already have this existing thing. It's pretty much done. I now want to make like a thing to share with you, like a book, a DVD, a Blu-ray, I want to make something and share it with you. So this is essentially a glorified pre-order. And that's great because you can still offer exclusives to people, but the idea is that it is not going to interrupt the typical content that your fans are used to getting from you. Whereas patronage, where a patronage Kickstarter or crowdfunding campaign, very much you are essentially declaring, like, look, I need to do this and raise X amount, or else I'm not going to be able to continue with this. So that's where, if you're doing a patronage campaign, it's much easier to line yourself towards being above the safety, because since you're basically reaching out as a, look, I need this to go on making this thing that I'm already making, your costs will probably be a little lower, and you can kind of weather that out throughout it and expect that you're going to get more people in because it's a call to action for them, because you're essentially saying, look, I'm not going to be able to do this if you aren't here, if you aren't helping me out. And that galvanizes people a lot more than just regular consumerism, which is pre-order. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, a lot of people are still going to come out to do pre-orders, but if you're doing a pre-order campaign to actually make a good or a product, you should absolutely be making sure some things fall within your safety, because you're always going to have there's always going to be potential issues. Something might happen with the manufacturer, something might happen with shipping, something might happen with customs, something might happen with any one number of things, and you want to make sure that your goal was not at the bottom of the line to prevent you from actually making, like, breaking even. So the key to either one of these is to make your project special, and by that, I very much mean participation and exclusive. So participation is very much in line with giving people not just behind the scenes access, which sometimes they can get, as part of traditional, like, media sources, getting on DVDs, things like that, the specials. Participation is more like making fans and the people you're reaching out to feel like they're a part of the creation process. This is really easy to do with patronage campaigns because you're emphatically saying, like, look, I literally can't do this without you. So, doing thank yous, doing, inclusion in credits, doing inclusions as, like, public notices, tweeting, like, posting, saying thank yous to people, all of that sort of thing is helps people feel like they're now a part of this thing that they love even more. Like they're no longer just an observer, they're like a small, tiny part of this thing that they love, and that makes them a fan for life. Exclusive is very much something along the lines of a consumer experience, but something that they typically wouldn't be able to get somewhere else. So this is where things like signed editions or like special treatment editions of a work or a product come into play. So, for example, a book is an easy example. Doing a special foil treatment just for people who back the Kickstarter is a low-cost thing to do, and it's really kind of cool for the people who then back the project, because then they're going to know that they're the only ones with that special treatment, and it's a publicly known fact that then they helped out. So it both makes them feel like they helped it both lets them showcase their participation and gives them something exclusive. Every project should have a bit of each. Depending upon whether or not you're doing a pre-order or a patronage campaign is going to affect which way it skews. So the key to both of these, though, is you have to always be honest. And that means that, if you're doing a patronage campaign, being clear with the facts, saying like, look, I have to do this much freelance a month to pay my bills. Which detracts me from working on, this animated series or this comic that I'm giving you or the show or this podcast. Like, so I need to raise this much in order to be able to dedicate full time to get like this arc done or get this book done. And then you're not being disingenuous to your fans. If you're doing essentially what amounts to a glorified pre-order, don't do a what I've seen before is people essentially what's known as holding a product hostage, where you've essentially already done all the work, you've already even printed the thing or made the thing, but you're essentially just using Kickstarter for a media event to do pre-orders, and you're setting like a really low goal. Like, people kind of treat that badly. It's not really approved of by the fan base, because then you're essentially just using them for a quick burst of attention, and it's nothing really special. It's not gonna do anything for you in the long term. Whereas if you're doing a pre-order and you're saying, look, we want to raise money to make this book extra special, or we want to raise money to make this Blu-ray collection extra special, so here's what we're going to do. If we raise this much, we're going to be able to do it. If we raise this much more, here's all the extras we're going to throw in. We're going to make it really special for all you guys, but here's what we intend to do, period. That's fine, so long as you are always honest with the people who you are asking this feedback and money from. You're going to be fine. So kind of that's that then leads you into the project. I'm going to leave it on the Q&A thing, but I'm going to go on a bit more. That is all that you need to do before a project starts. So it's a significant amount of work. I emphasize doing it because a lot of people rush to do a campaign because they're excited about it. They've got a project they want to work on. You're in the midst of making something, and it's just all you want to do, so you want to make sure you can do it. But living and dying by going big and then essentially not being able to deliver because you didn't realize that, manufacturing something was going to take too long, or that it was going to cost an exorbitant amount to ship out, or you weren't aware of an additional cost as part of your process, it will then lead you to answering emails for months or, a year or two, having to say, hey, here's why we haven't gotten you your thing yet, or here's why I haven't done this yet. So that's kind of the nitty-gritty. That's the foundational work of every project that you should be doing. From there, it all becomes incredibly focused to your particular project and what you're doing. there's a few general rules about, how you handle social media, but at the end of the day, that's the surface layer of what can be applied to every project. From there, everything that I do everything I do at Breadpig is super particular with people's fan bases, people's followers, and kind of like just what the community is about. So it gets really particular. You, at the end of the day, are the one who knows your fan base best, so you are going to have a really good idea as to what their needs and wants are going to be, and that's how you, to go back, make it special. And that's how you kind of shepherd in your campaign. So I'm kind of done with my little presentation. I'm going to kill screen share.
Awesome. So that was a whole lot of really awesome, amazing information. George, I'm wondering if at the end of this you can share that presentation with me, and I can maybe share with everyone in the network. That'd be great. Again, I'm going to ask everyone listening, if you want to ask any and all questions, now is definitely the time to do it. You can post it in the little sidebar question and answer section there. So we'll be going through and, well, you know what? I'm sure, Nate, do you have any very specific questions you want to get started with while I give them a few minutes to ask their questions?
I do. I think to get out of the way so that people don't have it over their heads, I want George to address Saxon Moore's question about how Breadpig's pricing works, so that people understand how that works before we get into the other questions, because I have lots of other ones.
Sure. So Breadpig, we basically we prefer to work on a project-to-project basis. We don't really like to just do like consulting, on an hourly basis. So what we do is we, sit down with people, assess the project, see how much kind of work they're going to need from us. And again, part of this is our whole goal is we don't want to be an unnecessary middleman. So it's all about assessing like what comfort levels you have. If you don't like to be handling customer service, if you don't like to be handling costing, like whatever, that all we factor in, figure out how many hours it's going to be, and for projects we do a discounted rate. Like we said, we really don't like doing just hourlies, but we do have an hourly rate. For projects we typically discount it like 50%, so it usually winds up only being around like $100 equivalent an hour for a project, particularly like crowdfunding campaigns. That said, we don't take any money unless a project is successful. So, whenever we work with someone on a Kickstarter, we're in it with them until they're successful. We're with them for them to be successful. Like, I've seen a lot of kind of strategists and consultants be like, "Oh yeah, pay us like this much in advance, and we'll get your campaign on X, Y, or Z," and that doesn't make sense to anyone at Breadpig, because you're trying to raise money. And yeah, there's the old adage, you got to spend money to make money, but it's like you're crowdfunding. Like, if someone's not confident in their abilities to help you be successful and make sure that you make a profit off of your project, that's weird. So yeah, I mean, we take the risk, and then usually we assess like a small like bonus based on how well the project performs over its initial goal. So we'll get a small bonus of money made beyond goal, and then that's it.
So that's how you worked with us. There was a minimum fee for completion, and then a small percentage of everything above the goal. Is that still the kind of pricing structure that you? So what specific services do you get or do you offer for that money?
So a lot of times, pretty typically, we'll wind up doing the whole P&L, like that whole process that I just did of figuring out total cost for like good shipping cost, doing estimates there. We'll do that kind of breakdown, and then kind of go through your social media audience, figure out your safety, figure out what we feel the average, figure out like reward tiers, work with you to develop those, and source necessary manufacturers for them, and then we'll kind of do the math and figure out like, all right, well, here's what your safety is, and here's what we think the average like amount is going to be. Here's what we believe we can work that up to, and additionally, some people, like I mentioned, some people want us to be on the ground for like answering questions like for their project because they get antsy about doing that. Particularly like individual creators sometimes will do that, so we'll offer that. For some people though, it's also they also want us to manage like the logistical end. So we've got several partners that we work with that are fulfillment centers that'll handle all your like warehousing and shipping. So we'll basically set you up with one of them and then either help you do like the formatting for them, or if you want to run it from there because you're going to set up an e-shop with them, we'll basically do the introduction. Again, we don't want to be the middleman. We don't want you paying us so we pay them. But if you wind up not wanting to be associated with any way, shape, or form that part of the process, we can do that. It's all of our services are a la carte, so it's very much we want to perfectly fill in the gaps for your organization and take up whatever you don't like to do or stresses you out too much. Like, that's it.
Awesome.
Cool. So let's go to from Drew's question. So Drew asks that Drew is in the process of starting his own Kickstarter. Like I've seen the process and it's coming along really well. He has this animated series coming out, Redneck Ninjas, as long as the Kickstarter goes, and he says that he's had success with over 100 backers, but he wants to know how he can increase that presence to like 500 backers.
Okay. So the campaign is live now?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. So I mean, basically that then goes into kind of that then would go into like your audience. So figuring out how many, like if you already have anything that you've been like posting online consistently, if you have a channel where you have, what's your subscriber amount, and then on social media, what are your amounts there? Basically, if you've already done things before and this is kind of the new one, what you're going to want to do is basically really kind of like send out like the call to action. You would probably definitely treat this as like patronage and talk to the previous people who have like supported you and really be like, look, I really need you to reach out to friends, family, like other people online, and help spread the word about this campaign because I really want to do this next thing for you. And that's going to be kind of like that'll be your initial push, and then from there, it all comes down to what particular influences you have and what other types of what other types of media and entertainment you feel like this really syncs up with. So then from there you would go after, so you would go after blogs and, kind of tastemakers within those communities and approach them about, covering it. You would show them like prior work, anything that you have that's related to this, and try to get them talking about it once once you've had like the initial big like fan like led push.
Awesome. Cool. So again, we only have one last question. If there's no other questions, we'll probably.
I have a bunch of questions.
Great. Do you want to go to your questions? Because you want. Okay. So as some of you might have or YouTube recently announced that they're doing like their own crowdfunding source. Saxon asks like, what would Breadpig do? I don't know if you have anything in place for that yet because it was just announced. It's brand new, and I don't even know when the YouTube crowdfunding thing is going to come out. Even it's just like in the works.
Yeah, it's I mean, I'm waiting to hear back from some people. I mean, we'll definitely like work with people like on it, but I mean, at this stage, it's announced. That's exciting, but. Hands in the air, I apologize. Like, I don't know why I can't get video to come back after I did the screen share. It's just like...
It's okay. It's a cute little bread icon. Bread pig. I like it.
Yeah, so I mean, it's
Inside.
absolutely something we'll be interested in taking a look at. I mean, again, the platform you launch on, Kickstarter is the obvious, like, they're the most popular kid in the room for crowdfunding. They have a lot of people that literally just surf Kickstarter for, projects to back, and they have, that name brand recognition that people are like. If you have fans that have not heard about crowdfunding before, or don't actively crowdfund, they've probably at least heard the name Kickstarter. So there's sometimes people who are scared to give money to anyone online that's not like Amazon or Apple. So, it's one of those things where they get the most foot traffic, and they are constantly trying to improve like back-end tools for people running campaigns, but that's that, like in terms of rates and things like that, it's all going to depend on like that sort of thing. So I have no idea what they're going to be unleashing on us. So, but I'm looking forward to it.
And as a network, as more and more details come out, we're definitely gonna let you all know, because that's a big deal for a lot of people. So as we know more about what's happening on YouTube, we will definitely let you all know as well.
And our inside sources have said nothing.
No.
They might be setting up to make an announcement at VidCon, which is a big convention for online streaming businesses, the last week of June, but nothing. We haven't heard it saying, so we don't know what it's look like. We're not sure what it's going to evolve. I had someone tell me about it at Playlist last March, but they also just said something like, "Oh, this is something we're thinking about." So we'll see what they do.
We'll see how that goes.
Kickstarter, one of the liabilities for Kickstarter in our experience has been payment options in Europe, right? We have a big fan base in Europe, in the UK, and sometimes it can be hard. But I understand there might have been changes. George, can you speak to that?
Yeah, they're definitely working on a number of changes regarding the payment options. So they're I'm not certain how much of this I can say. There's definitely some exciting things coming up, but recently they have made, since they've reached into letting people launch campaigns in a number of European countries, it's getting increasingly easier. Still, the one thing that's the drawback is that a lot of people really prefer to use PayPal, and in a number of countries it's easier to set up a PayPal account than it is an Amazon Payments account. So that's like one of the drawbacks you have to keep an eye out for. Depending upon what type of product you're doing a side PayPal kind of a fundraising thing, or there's a number of platforms. I know something that's getting increasingly popular for video games is Humble Bundle is basically setting up like a very easy way to do widgets to collect what they call Slacker backer rewards, and then that allows you to essentially post-campaign throw up and still take pre-orders at what they recommend a slightly increased rate over the Kickstarter for like the most popular tiers. So basically those 3 mid-ranges I said, and then that way that takes Google Checkout, Amazon Payments, PayPal, and they're working more. They've also said that they're looking to do more in terms of like other content. So right now they're basically just games and books, but I wouldn't be surprised if in the next couple of months they announce video content. So
if I'm looking at all these different options, Kickstarter, Indiegogo, Patreon, how do I decide very quickly which one I should go with? Just George Rohac wisdom here.
Sure. I mean, if you have basically one thing that absolutely Indiegogo has over Kickstarter, and you guys heard this, probably last week, is one of the things that they have that's kind of nice that helps it so that you don't kind of nuke your search engine optimization is whenever they've recently released the ability for you to essentially add the widgets and kind of a skin onto your website that will essentially put the crowdfunding campaign onto your site. The issue that's really good if you have a landing page that people are already coming to for the content. Again, the other thing is Kickstarter is kind of the name brand association. Like people, it's not a super exclusive. It's not like a incredibly hard to get into. They basically just make sure you aren't opening in the eShop and doing terrible things, but there's a notoriety with it, and the fee difference between Kickstarter and Indiegogo is 1%. The average difference between most campaigns is fairly significant. And by that I mean projects on Kickstarter typically make significantly more than those on Indiegogo. Like I said, we might see that change if you have a landing page where you already have a ton of traffic coming to your site, and you're able to host your crowdfunding campaign there. We've seen that Will Wheaton's campaign on Indiegogo did really well, and that's absolutely in part because of that capacity. So if you have a landing site, that gets a significant amount of traffic, maybe Indiegogo. If not, then Kickstarter is going to bring in a monster amount of traffic just from themselves. Even if you don't get staff picked, even if you don't get a featured look, even if you don't get in the newsletter, you will get a much larger portion of traffic going to you because there's so many more eyeballs of people just regularly surfing through Kickstarter. And they more than make up for their 5%.
How long till Kickstarter debuts the embeddable widget?
I wouldn't be surprised if it's around the corner. I know that they're working on a number of really cool things that are going to be launched before the end of the year. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm on kind of edge of my seat because a few of them they won't even tell me about, and so I'm very excited about that. That means it's super secret. So, but yeah, I mean, sorry to kind of stretch the answer out, but yeah, it really comes down to, I mean, if you've got a site where you're bringing a lot of people in already, it might be better to utilize a tool like that from Indiegogo. If not, then Kickstarter is going to get you a lot more traffic, and there's a lot of not just people surfing, but there's also a lot of blogs that cover crowdfunding and almost exclusively highlight more Kickstarter stuff than non-Kickstarter stuff. So,
George, real quick, how does we have a couple of questions on tax. How does the tax factor in? Does it matter where you're from, really, or is it a blanket tax rule on all crowdfunding?
All right, it's a blanket rule. Basically, if you're getting, it's a blanket rule, and I'm waiting for the IRS to come down on it and actually make some declarations, because right now it's income. Right now it's clearly income. Whenever you get reports from Kickstarter, that goes to your Amazon Payments account that you get a 1099 for. Yes. So it's reported income. That said, because of the way the campaigns are, whenever you get to the tax about holdings and everything else, it becomes a real gray mess right now. And by that I mean it's super risky, depending upon what financial specialist you talk to. Also, talk to a financial specialist. Some people say that since people technically, on Kickstarter, you're a backer. You're basically spending X amount of dollars, and someone is sending you a reward that is a thank you for you giving them that money. So they're technically not making a purchase. So that's a big difference whenever you do write-offs and things like that. So some accountants are yeah, that's how it is. It's basically whenever you donate money to PBS or something and they send you a tote for $60, you wouldn't have bought a tote for $60, but you wanted to help out PBS. You also got a tote. So some people say it that way. Also, PBS is 501c3. But, it's definitely a gray area right now. I mean, if you're an individual, definitely presume you're going to definitely set aside at least 15% at bare minimum for it. I mean, if you're in a high tax bracket, it could be as much as 30. But I mean, most of the time, if you're making a physical thing, right? If you're doing something like printing a book, you're going to have a monster amount, and then you're shipping the book. You're going to have a monster amount of write-offs. So if you're actually fulfilling physical rewards, you're going to have a significant amount of things that cost you money, which will reduce the tax liability. However, if it's more a patronage campaign, more a, hey, I need this so I don't have to take freelance and and focus on this project, then you're not going to have a lot of write-offs, which means you're going to be owing way more on it.
I should say we had an interesting experience with our tax attorney about Kickstarter. So much so that if you are raising tens of thousands of dollars, you want to make sure that you allocate a little bit of money to consult with the tax.
Yeah. Basically, as soon as you that's it. I mean, once you have runaway success, make sure you take care of it and that it doesn't consume you. I've seen a lot of projects that wind up raising 200, 300, 400% of their goal, and then they didn't think things through, forgot about taxes or other stuff, and it ended up eating them. So beware stretch goals. Beware stretch goals that wind up costing you too much. So
plan everything out really, really far in advance.
Yes.
Saxton also asks a brief question. So you can add up the overall total sum of followers and subscribers from our various social sites and consider that our 3%. That question makes sense?
You mostly correct. Basically, you want to kind of like average it out because there's going to be some crossover. So basically, take a look at your audience. Is a thing that you'll want to also just like do a quick gander at. But usually, you can add them all up, divide by like how many you're doing, and kind of get like an average out, and then have your 3%. But if you have a lot of unique areas, like there are some creators and some companies that they have significantly different like followings on the different like platforms. So basically, like the people who follow them on Tumblr don't follow them at all on Twitter. So those are all like unique people. So 9 times out of 10, you can just add them all together and multiply by 3%, and you're good. But again, take a quick glance at your audience and make sure that it isn't like the same. Like if you have 1,000 people, if it isn't the same 1,000 people following you on every single like area, because otherwise then you'll want to do an average and then multiply by 3%.
Okay.
But like I said, the majority of the time you can just add them all together, multiply by 3%.
Awesome. Can you have the same project on multiple crowdfunding sites?
That's heavily frowned upon. It's not technically like against the rules or illegal, but it's usually pretty frowned upon because it's frowned upon by the fans because it makes them confused because which project do they back? Like what goal is what? Like is it if you set like a $10,000 goal, was that, and you have it on 2 platforms like that, do you actually need to raise $20,000 or do you just need to raise 10? What happens with like your stretch goals and stuff if you hit both goals and then you hit like your goal was 10 and you make 20 on each platform? Well, like what? That means you have $40,000. What do you do with it? People are going to ask you a ton of questions. It's really not worth it. Because and also the more important thing is you're going to be splitting where you're focusing people. So, and that's going to be a big deal. Like whenever you're running a campaign like this, a lot of your time is going to be like asking people to go to the place where they insert the money. So, if you have 2 places where they can do that and they're completely different websites, like what do the fans then tell their friends and mutual fans like where to go? You're making it so that they have to make a choice, which then means they're less likely to spread that information because they will be uncertain. So make it easy.
Right. That's why we also don't recommend like having 2 YouTube channels unless we technically have 2 just because we yeah, we have different brands, but it's very much, it's so ridiculous to split your audience by so much.
Yeah.
Simple, keep it simple, stupid.
Yeah. Keep it simple, stupid.
Let's grab Ben's question, and I have one more question.
Okay, so Ben chimes in. Let's just, because I know there's like so many different things you can do for like to get hype, but what are like some of the biggest things you can suggest before you start a Kickstarter to really get people know that it's coming down the pipe and get them excited for it?
You know, there's kind of two differing thoughts on that, on whether or not you should hype the audience for the campaign before you launch it, or whether you should just drop it and then essentially treat it like a massive event that you're then like pushing. Personally, I err towards the latter, where basically you don't really talk about the campaign too much. Like you can mention it, it doesn't have to be top secret, but basically don't advertise the campaign before you do the campaign, because during the course of you running the campaign, you should be talking about it on like a daily basis. So if in the lead up to you talking about the campaign on a daily basis, you're talking about the campaign and telling people this campaign is coming, they're going to get like the fatigue pretty quickly, because they're going to think that the thing has been going on forever, when actually it's only going to be going on for, you know, like the 30 days. So, yeah, I mean, there's differing like reports and opinions about it, but I definitely feel like from a fan standpoint, it definitely seems like if you're promoting the campaign before the campaign is out, it can cause a lot of fatigue, because, you know, it seems like it's going on for longer than it has, and it just gives the impression that like this was, you know, the whole focus of the work. So plan for launch day, so with that in mind, you plan for a launch day where if you have, you know, you update like, you know, your channel with a like video about, you know, the campaign, link to campaign, crazy social media burst, and go back to, while you're doing your planning stages and you're looking at that make it special, identify things that you know your fans get excited about. So if there's like a particular I'm just gonna throw a hypothetical here. You're doing a Blu-ray or DVD collection. There's you know, a particular segment that you once made a joke about that fans have made into an in-joke within the community, but you never really intended to make it like a full thing. Well, if you were then thinking about doing that as like an extra for, you know, the collection, for the like digital/physical collection, wait and then use that as an addition, as like the next day's like teaser. Basically, you kind of in advance, as part of that making it special, you identify all these things that get your community excited, and then you like strategically deploy them throughout the campaign on social media and as update posts. One of the things that we did with the Johnny Wander campaign was they had a number of color comics from their as part of their like webcomic that's traditionally black and white. They're part of this like collection cuttings that they were just doing. Yeah. Well, we planned out, okay, post these like the full color strips to Tumblr on this many days after the campaign launches, and then post a new one like every 2 days. And they got to the third one, which was the second comic they did for Cecilia, which originally they posted the comic online on their website back in 2009, so it's pretty old. But they posted it to Tumblr, and it was a week after the campaign launched, and it wound up it's up to nearly 100,000 notes now. And it brought in a massive amount of traffic, because basically it was something that series within the community really excited them, and it also was a complete story, so it was appealing to new audiences as well. It gave them an entry point. So planning stuff out like that's going to make your fans really excited is kind of key. And then you just build this little pool of stuff that you're going to tease out over the course of the campaign, so that like at least every other day you're revealing something or making a tease.
Cool. So we're going to have one last question, George, and then I think we're going to come off. If any of you guys have like a burning question that you really want to have answered after we leave, you can totally email me and I can forward it to George. So this last question, what about, like, say your first campaign fails, what about repeating your campaign? Is there any way you should go about it differently the second time, or same exact strategy? Should you not do it at all? What do you think?
There is absolutely nothing wrong with doing a follow-up campaign to a failed campaign. There used to be this weird idea that, like, oh no, that meant you could never go back, you could never do it again. No, wrong. There's been several people who have done it. No, there's a number of video game like projects that have done it, and animation. But basically, take a look at what was wrong about the first project. So, you know, do you have to narrow your scope? Was it that you weren't offering things that excited people? Take a look at like the notes and the comments from like the campaign. Did a lot of people say things like, "Oh, you know, we really wish that we could have gotten this," or we're like, you know, "Oh, I'm not interested in that at all," or was your goal like not correct? So kind of go through that whole foundational build-up again and kind of assess like where the flaws were, and then relaunch it and with like improved notes. And even again, always be honest. So mention like, hey, you know, we did this before. Oh, like we did this before. It wasn't successful. Like this time, like, you know, we took the feedback that everyone had from it, and so this time we're launching again. You know, hoping it, with all of your feedback incorporated, we hope to be like really successful this time. Here's what we've changed up, and you just do that as like, you know, in the body of the text or in the email to, you know, the previous people who were excited about the first campaign that failed, and then that way, you know, you're showcasing to anyone who showed interest in the first one that they were important to you doing this again, so they're much more likely to come back and, you know, throw a ton of support behind you. And then that way you're also being honest to the community and seeing like, oh, hey, this person has thought about this a lot more, and this seems like a lot tighter and like much more streamlined. So you'll have there actually seems to be like admitting fault is a good way to get people to trust that you're going to do things right the second time. So
awesome.
So I have one last question for George.
Go
Thank
for
you
it.
so much for all this. What's a minimum project that you would want to work with? Do you have some way of, you know, like telling people that, like,
I mean,
not this big or not doing this kind of thing?
We've worked on like really small projects. I think the smallest one that I've worked on was they were trying to raise and their initial like goal was like 5K. You know, so we'll do pretty small. Again, like we're pretty selective. Like we want to work on like we want to work on like a specific like set of like cool things. So we definitely do evaluate it, and it's also like timing. I mean, if, you know, the one thing that I will say we prefer is 4 to 6 weeks minimum to be working with you on the campaign, because to get all of that foundational stuff done, we want to make sure it's done right, and we want to make sure we can review and check things. I mean, the note about the, you know, social media, you know, there was one time we ran into a little bit of a snafu, and our numbers were off, and we discovered that the people we were working with had bought Facebook followers. Around 5,000.
No, nobody does that.
Around 5,000 of them, and
Oh,
so
my goodness.
so it skewed the metrics a tiny bit.
A little bit.
You know, and so basically, like, since then, it's like we want to make sure that, you know, all of the stuff's right, go through everything, and, you know, so yeah, it's definitely not the size. I mean, for us, it's less about the money and more about helping people make cool stuff that, you know, traditionally they wouldn't be able to, because, you know, a large entity wouldn't approve it. So.
Awesome.
Well,
Well, thank you so very much for coming on with us, and thank you everyone who watched this live. Again, this will be uploaded and available on youtube.com/channelfrednetwork. That is our little business-facing YouTube page, and there's a lot of all the other live streams that we did. Like I said, we did Patreon, we did Indiegogo. This is the last of the crowdfunding series. I know there's lots of other crowdfunding sources out there, but these were the big three that popped out at us. Again, if you have any other questions, suggestions for future live streams, you can email me at jennifer@frederator.com, and I will either answer your questions, forward them over to George so he can answer them. If you're interested in asking George for help, his website is
Breadpig.com.
Perfect. Look how simple that is. George is also going to send me the presentation that he had earlier today, and I'm going to put it in the Dropbox files that you guys all have access to. That's the one where you got the best practice documents from, and like the YouTube and the social media ones, all that. So that Dropbox file, I'm going to throw them in there. And yeah, so I hope you all have a really good weekend, and we will see you all next time. Bye, everybody.
Later. Thanks again.
And